This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on 88th Indian Air Force Day. The participants are Air Vice Marshal Manmohan Bahadur, retired, and Ajay Banerjee, journalist.
Air Vice Marshal, could you tell our listeners that what is the significance of the Air Force Day on October 8th? Why October 8th?
First of all, greetings to all the listeners. This is Nation's Air Force Day. The IAF was established actually on the 8th of October 1932 by an act of statute. It was established on that day. That is why 8th of October is celebrated as the Air Force Day. Effectively, the first flight came into being on 1st April 1933 because it took some time. The 6 Royal Air Force trained officers and 19 airmen, that time they used to be called Hawai Sepoys. They were brought in, and that's where they were set up with 4 Wapiti Army Cooperation biplanes at Big Road, Karachi. So that's how the first A flight of the planned number 1 Army Cooperation Squadron. So as the name itself suggests, as you can see, that the Air Force at that point of time was set up as an adjunct to Army operations. Of course, over the years, this has certainly changed. The Indian Air Force stands not just to help Army and the Navy in certain cases, but for standalone operations, strategic and interdiction, for making sure that our surface forces operate safely without any offensive action from the adversary.
Manmohan sir, the public gets to see those dazzling air displays on the Air Force Day. How does the Air Force see the young pilots, the engineers, the air warriors? What does the Air Force Day mean to them?
Just like an individual's birthday, you feel happy on that day. Same thing is for the Air Force. The Air Force is a small service, well-knit service. It's a special liking to the uniform. I spent 37 and a half years, actually you can say almost 4 decades in the blues. And even now as I'm talking to you about my uniform, I'm getting the goosebumps. That's the link to your parent service, whom, you have taken a vow on the Constitution of India to preserve the integrity of the nation. So when the Air Force Day comes, the officers, the airmen, a large number of civilians in the Air Force, and our non-combatants who are there, they all feel special pride in having worn that uniform, the privilege of wearing that uniform, and the fact that we are able to showcase to the nation where their money is being spent. After all, the defense budget is very much productive in the sense it's making sure that the nation is safe and secure for economic development. So from that angle, it is a very productive. But for the common man on the street, person who reads the newspapers or watches it on television, that's a great way of showcasing the nation's Air Force, your Air Force.
Manmohan sir, as you said, we started off with Wapitis in 1932. In 2020, 88 years down the line, we probably hold 4th generation and 4.5 generation planes like the Rafale in the arsenal. We soon will be getting the S-400 air defense missile, which is rated as one of the best air defense missiles in the world. And also we fly out one of the best drones in the world. How far the Air Force has come in these 88 years? What are the changes you see?
We started with Wapiti, the biplanes, which were contemporary at that point of time, graduated on to, during the World War, to Spitfires and Hurricanes and Lancaster bombers. When the nation got its independence, we entered the jet era with the arrival actually of the Vampire jet. And then came the French Oregon, the French Mystères, and in 61, 62, that's the time the MiG-21 FL, supersonic aircraft, that's the dawn of the supersonic age as far as the Air Force is concerned. So the MiG-21s came in, and then there was a large induction of the MiG-21 series, followed later by 23s, 27s, 29s, and in between came the ISR, the reconnaissance MiG-25s. Around the end of 70s, beginning of 80s, came the Jaguars, deep penetration strike aircraft, and the Mirage 2000. Both these aircraft are still in service, as are very few MiG-21s now. So we kept pace with technology, entering the jet age, the speeds going higher, the weaponry getting more sophisticated and lethal. And as we entered this century, we had precision munitions coming into our arsenal. And we all would have seen that in 1999 during the Kargil conflict, the laser-guided bomb strike during the Kargil operations on the Tiger Hill. So that's where we're keeping up, and now we're getting into the unmanned series. We have got Israeli origin Heron unmanned aircraft with us. There is a lot of talk on their weaponization. It's there in the open press. We need to get into the unmanned era greater way, because because that's where operations are heading to. Manned, unmanned teaming is the name, where manned aircraft will control unmanned aircraft who are flying the formation as formation members. So that's where the world is heading to, and we are trying to get into that. If you talk of indigenous industry, the government has laid out its plan very clearly, at least 10 years. You remember, our squadron strength is down to 30. The chief is on record, or the deputy chief is on record as saying that we will reach 37 squadrons, fighter squadrons, by the end of this decade. So this has to come from the HAL-made Tejas, Mark 1 presently, Mark 1A, and then the 114 fighter aircraft contract, which will have to be imported, but it will be a foreign machine made in India. That's how we will get the numbers up.
Manmohan sir, you have made a very important point about technology and how about unmanned planes will be the future and manned will control the manned. This is a very important aspect for listeners to understand. Sir, I want to take you on the subject of technology further because Air Force is a very high technology intensive Air Force. The Air Chief Marshal R.K. Bhadoria in a recent press conference in Delhi said that the Air Force is looking at around 450 planes, which includes fixed wing and rotary wing, that means helicopters. And he said that most of them will be made in India, which includes the AMCA, the Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft, the LCA Mark 1 and the LCA Mark 2, and also the what you spoke about, the 114 fighter jet deal, which is being referred to as the multi-role fighter aircraft, which we are supposed to be making in India. All these 450 planes or helicopters we talk about in the next 20 years would mean something like 24 productions out in every year. Are we up to the mark, and do you think we can do it?
That is the challenge, a real big challenge in front of Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. Firstly, to get the production line up of the Tejas Mark 1 and the Mark 1A. That's the starting point. Presently, they are making just about 8 to 10 aircraft per year. Has to go up to minimum 16 and more. Simultaneously, the Tejas Mark 2 will be getting developed, and AMCA, the Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft, that would be coming up. So where we have faltered earlier in the Tejas, we should have learned from our mistakes is that at a certain point in the development cycle of the prototype, the production facilities need to start coming up. The jigs, the tooling, the trained manpower. So that once the certification of the prototype is over, there is no delay subsequently in production. I'm sure, and we have seen this in the last 1 decade, that things have changed for the better so that we catch up with where we have lost out in terms of numbers and in terms of quality. So you talked of 24 production lines. Not exactly, in the sense that you have the helicopter division of HAL separately. But HAL cannot manage it. It has to be done with private industry. We have to let the private industry come up. Let the R&D, research and development, be done by DRDO, by the Aeronautical Development Agency, by the Helicopter Design Bureau. But thereafter, the plans must be moved on to private industry. That's where those many number of production lines will come up. Otherwise, it will be a very difficult task.
Manmohan sir, we have been listening to the successive chiefs who have spoken about the subject, and you have spoken on the subject. You think that we are sitting on the cusp of military aviation history? It is make or break for us now, because the next 20 years will define where India stands on the global high table.
This is correct. No country will give you cutting-edge technology. It's an accepted fact. So to think that somebody will come to our help or will somebody fight our wars is living in a dream world. That's not going to happen. At the same time, we need to be clear that everything need not be made in India. When you see around the world, the aircraft which there, the fighters, the transport helicopters, it's the number of industries that produce engines are very few. Russians have got 2, the French have got 1 company, the Brits have got 1, and the Americans have got 2 or 3. So to think that the whole aircraft will be 100% in India cannot happen. So we have to plan our steps accordingly now. Learn from the mistakes of the past almost 4 decades, where we have gone overboard in saying that we have achieved this, but thereafter then what? So our plans should be firmly on ground, and we must realize what can be done in the short term, the medium term, and the long term, so that we move along a calculated path.
Manmohan sir, when you talk of this calculated path, do you think a kind of a JV for an engine, which is very successful in case of the Dhruv helicopter, we have a JV with Safran, the French company. You think a JV for an engine for the fighter jets also could be the future?
There are 2 parts of an engine. One is metallurgy. Metallurgy to withstand those extremely high temperatures in the combustion chamber and for the turbines, which rotate at extremely high speeds. One is metallurgy. How do you mold that metallurgy? And the second thing is the basic technology of the jet engine. no country will give you the core technology of a jet engine. So even if it means setting up a collaboration with a foreign entity, an engine manufacturer, we have to learn on the job. R&D has to happen parallelly so that at some time we move away from it. So we have to tap our talent. And for that you have to spend money. If you think we get it for cheap, it's not possible. So a JV, yes, but finally it has to be indigenous R&D that will see us through.
Are you suggesting that the Kaveri engine project should carry on?
That's $1 million question, because what I understand presently is it's just the core engine that is being developed. You know, the engine has got a core and then you develop around it. Core engine which is being developed for UAVs. But when you're talking of high performance engine with afterburning that is using reheat to power your Tejas Mark II or the AMCA, we are talking of totally different league. So a call would have to be taken, because remember, R&D costs a lot and you have to look at the economics of how many you require. If you just require some 1,000 odd engines for one particular thing, over what time period are we talking of? So can we get all our requirements, that is helicopter engines, UAV engines, transport aircraft engines, fighter engines together and make a plan how to proceed? Because the total numbers are huge, though it may be economically viable. But to think that we can straight away make high-performance engines for the AMCA and it is totally indigenous, I think is a bit too much. Why not take smaller steps for smaller aircraft? Remember the HTT-40, the trainer aircraft, the engine is important. Why can't we start perhaps with that, for example? The advanced jet trainer, the IJT, that's using a Russian engine. Why not that? They are low-powered engines. They are not afterburning engines. So let's take step by step is what I say.
Manmohan sir, now I'll take you on to Ladakh, the operations. The Air Force has come into its own, especially with the technology it inducted. I will cut off the date from Kargil at 99 and after that. You inducted the C-17, C-130, Chinook, all basically American platforms. So these platforms have come into great praise during this operation, which we have launched to counter China in Ladakh along the LAC, where you have deployed troops, and the Air Force played a major role in carrying even tanks up there, and even equipment and other stuff, which has come into public domain. The Army Chief has praised it, the Air Force Chief has praised it. How do you see this happen?
The airlift capability of the Indian Air Force is huge. When I say airlift, it is not only the fixed wing, that is, the aircraft, the transport aircraft, but also the rotary wing, the helicopters. The C-17, we have 11 of them. IL-76s, roughly we can have 6, 7 or sometimes even 8 on the flight line. We have almost 60, 70 AN-32 serviceable at any given time. So this is a huge airlift capability. And when you come to the helicopters, the Chinooks, wonderful buy, and they came in at the right time when they were bought, because it's very maneuverable and it can carry at sea level around 10 tons. As you go up, of course, the payload reduces. The Mi-17 fleet is very rugged. It has seen operations, and we have got a large number of them. The ALH for intermediate task, the Dhruv, and the Cheetal and Cheetahs for going to those small matchbox size helipads right on the front line. So the airlift capability, to include both the fixed wing and the rotary wing, is very good. We can be proud of that. And actually, once this all ends up, we can actually, I have written about it to say that the Indian Air Force, because of these two things, and when you combine it with the NDRF, the Disaster Relief Force, we can actually say that we can be a regional humanitarian assistance and disaster relief provider, HADR provider. We can very well go to aid of other countries too. So, but getting back to Ladakh, they have done a wonderful job, and the winters are now going to get even tougher as we go into November and December, actually heading till February. They have their task cut out because the roads will close. The Army would have provisioned the basic requirements, but still there are some things that have to be taken by air.
Manmohan sir, you have brought out brilliantly the role of the Air Force and its 88th birthday, which was today, and how the Air Force has evolved in these past 88 years from six-plane Air Force to what we are today, a global power, and as you rightly said, a regional power. We can be a HADR provider. Thank you for speaking to us, sir.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on 88th Indian Air Force Day. The participants were Air Vice Marshal Manmohan Bahadur, retired, and Ajay Banerjee, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can also listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our website, newsonair.com. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.